Why, hello, I'm Andy, and I'm here at Anacostia Station on the Green Line, looking at one of DC's most interesting, if not most tragic, transit tales.
If you watched our Secrets of the DC Streetcar Part 1 video, you remember that the existing modern DC streetcar runs from Union Station to Oklahoma Avenue. But DC's modern streetcar network was going to include so much more than just that segment. In fact, in the early 2000s, DC held a groundbreaking for another line, a line right here in Anacostia. But through a series of right-of-way disputes, expired contracts, and general funding woes, only a small portion of the line was built about 15 years ago, and none of it ever opened for passenger service. Various factors, many of which were beyond the control of DC's Department of Transportation, led to the Anacostia streetcar's demise. In a story so complex, we've decided to cover the full history of the line in a future video. But today, for the second part of our Secrets of the DC Streetcar series, we're going to tour the abandoned modern streetcar line here in Anacostia. Now let's explore DC's abandoned streetcar.
Now, what's really crazy about this is that in a lot of abandoned streetcar systems in the country around the United States, it's usually pre-World War II systems that got abandoned in the mid-20th century. DC even has some remnants of that system, of the pre-war system that was abandoned in the 1960s. But again, what's so unique about this is that this is a modern streetcar system that was had a groundbreaking in the 2000s, was built around 2010, about 15 years ago, and it was just never opened. And it's here, and we're gonna go see what's left.
What was built stretches from the intersection of Firth Sterling Avenue Southeast and Suitland Parkway to Joint Base Anacostia Bowling with 2 stops, one by the Berry Farm Public Housing Development and one by the Joint Base. The line then continues southwest as a single track down to the DC Streetcar Testing and Commissioning site, which actually did see some use back in the day. A small spur crosses South Capitol Street in order to access the site. In order to get to the start of the abandoned streetcar tracks, we exited the Anacostia Metro Rail Station's southern entrance and walked up Howard Road Southeast, taking a left at Firth Sterling Avenue Southeast, where we come across another set of abandoned rails. Not streetcar tracks, however, but abandoned freight tracks part of the old Shepherd Industrial Spur.
And so remember these tracks you can see here, part of the Shepherd Industrial Spur, as they literally laid the groundwork for the Anacostia line.
As originally, much of the Anacostia line was supposed to use this spur's existing right-of-way. But when disagreements between the DC Department of Transportation and CSX, the owner of the Shepherd Industrial Spur, erupted shortly after the project's groundbreaking in 2004, much of the route had to be shifted off of the spur. But more on that in our future video about the line's history. Soon enough, we cross Suitland Parkway and come across the first sign of the abandoned Anacostia line.
And this is crazy. I'm standing right here on the unfinished, abandoned modern streetcar tracks on Firth Sterling Avenue Southeast that just sort of start on nothing. And they keep going to the west, where we'll go next. But if you look up, you'll see the unfinished trolley poles that would have held up the wires that the streetcars would have gotten their power from, much like on the finished 8th Street line here in DC. But let's keep going down the line and see what else we find on the abandoned Anacostia line.
And further down the street, we find our first abandoned station, Berry Farm.
And so we've come a little further west down Firth Sterling Avenue Southeast to find what was one of the 2 stops actually built for the Anacostia line, the Berry Farm stop, which is right across from the Berry Farm Public Housing Development, which has since actually been torn down and is in the process of being redeveloped. Through all those changes, this platform, although never opened, has stayed put for about 15 years, weeds and all.
Berry Farm's other platform is right across the street. After the Berry Farm station, we continue under I-295, approaching South Capitol Street, where the tracks curve to the left as they approach the Joint Base Anacostia Bowling Station, the only other platform that was actually constructed on the Anacostia line.
So we've moved a little further west from the Berry Farm stop to the second of the 2 stops that were actually built for the Anacostia line, the stop serving Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. Now, this stop, it's only got 1 platform, unlike the other one. It is, of course, was supposed to be the terminus stop for the Anacostia line, but something very weird that I'll just point out here that, again, small fry as compared to the larger history, a larger part of the Anacostia line, is that the tracks, when they enter here, they enter as a double track, and they become a single track actually after the platform, which means that, and it depends on how they were going to operate it, either the arriving or the departing train would have to do some really weird maneuver to get to the platform. That's not typical of most streetcar systems. Even the H Street line, which is open, will always do a single track before the platform because it's, you know, it's a lot easier. Anyway, that being said, let's look at the actual station that's here. Unlike the Berry Farm stop, you've actually got some fencing here to separate the platform from the very busy and very fast moving South Capitol Street. The platform itself is in much more disrepair than the Berry Farm one. You've got, you follow me, Max, you can actually see some of the tiles here, some of the detectable warning surfaces, and let people know that they're close to the edge of the platform. Well, they're literally falling apart. You want to take one home? It's just very frustrating because it's all here. It never saw a lick of passenger service, not one. Now, if you go a little further down, and we will, a little further south on these tracks, you'll see that the trolley poles, which until this point still don't have any wires on them, actually do have wires on them because that part of the Anacostia line was actually used for testing the streetcars that would eventually make their way over to the H Street line. That's because they were connected to the DC Streetcar testing and commissioning site, which we'll go to as well, which is again a little further south down South Capitol Street. But it's just really sad, you know, that streetcars were used there. You can see the wires were there used, but they never made it here. And they never were used for passenger service on the Anacostia line, despite having all this infrastructure, which was not easy to build or plan. So with that, we're going to keep going south on South Capitol Street. We're going to go see what's left of the tracks, and we're going to go see the DC Streetcar testing and commissioning site. So let's keep moving.
Returning back to this footage we took when we rode along the streetcar tracks in October of 2024, you can really start to see the gradual deterioration of the tracks as it gets covered and almost taken back by nature. But then we get closer to the end of the line and the crossover track that crosses South Capitol Street.
So now we've made it to the end of the line at what was DC Streetcar's testing and commissioning facility here on South Capitol Street. Now, hasn't been used for that in quite a long time, but it was actually operational for quite a period of time. It's where they tested the streetcars that would ultimately be used on the H Street line, although many of them were supposed to be used on the Anacostia line. And that's why the trolley poles actually do have wires that could power the streetcars. Whether they can do that now, I don't think so, given the conditions of the tracks. Nonetheless, it was operational for a bit of time. Sadly, not working anymore from what I can tell. But other than being used for storage, it does now play host to another abandoned DC transit project, the DC Circulator.
And oddly enough, between our filming in October of 2024 and our filming in early 2025, the sign that was showing that this was once the testing and commissioning site for the DC Streetcar has been taken down.
And now that we've gone over what's left of the Anacostia line and the little bit that was actually used for testing, it really begs the question, how did we get here?
But for that, you'll have to wait for Secrets of the DC Streetcar, Part 3.